Hello, everyone. My name is Timothy Langley. Welcome to Langley Esquire's continuing series on policy review. Today is May 30th, 2024, and I'm going to talk today about hydrogen. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Japan is one of the most advanced countries in the world when it comes to hydrogen, and it wants to continue to be a leader here. Japan was the first country in the world to create and announce a policy document about hydrogen just very recently. Furthermore, you might not be aware, but the first commercially successful hydrogen fuel cell car was also released by a Japanese company, that was Toyota, in releasing Mirai. Regarding hydrogen policy and utilization, Japan has been leading the world. However, over time, many countries have started to focus on hydrogen, particularly from the perspective of decarbonization, climate change measures, and economic security, in addition to energy security. I would like to emphasize that global attention is now heavily focused on hydrogen. As I mentioned earlier, Japan is still one of the most advanced countries in terms of hydrogen production, and research and development. The market in Japan and collaborations with Japanese companies are sure to bring various business opportunities related to hydrogen. Of this, I'm very confident. The year 2024 marks a turning point in Japan's hydrogen policy, which is the reason for this policy update now. In the first half of this year, two important hydrogen-related laws were enacted. One is the Hydrogen Society Promotion Act, and the other is the CCS Business Act. This has enabled government support for hydrogen on a scale previously unseen in Japan or elsewhere in the world. Naturally, this support also includes participation by foreign countries. In the second half of this year, the core strategy of Japan's energy policy, the Basic Energy Plan, will be revisited as it is every 3 years. It has just begun this month. Japan is currently in the 6th Energy Policy Plan, and the 7th is scheduled by the end of this year. One key point will be how hydrogen is positioned within the new strategy. Since the government is creating new legislation on hydrogen and providing large-scale support for hydrogen, hydrogen's role in the 7th strategy will be even greater than it has been in the past. In any case, the progress of the Basic Energy Plan review is fairly important and something we need to keep our eye on. Hydrogen is generally classified into 3 categories: gray, blue, and green. Let me give you a closer look at each of them. One way of producing hydrogen is through reforming coal or natural gas. During this reforming process, CO2 is emitted. Therefore, the process of making hydrogen is not completely CO2 free. This is gray hydrogen, currently the type in use today. Although it emits CO2, it is inexpensive and easy to use. It plays a very important role in expanding the use of hydrogen, which is crucial as a first step towards more massively introducing hydrogen with lower CO2 emissions in the future. You can consider gray hydrogen as having this essential first player role. In the case of blue hydrogen, the production method is essentially the same. It is made from reforming of gas or coal, but the CO2 emitted during this process is captured and stored underground and not released into the atmosphere. Blue hydrogen can roughly be considered CO2 free, but it is not completely CO2 free. The technology for carbon capture and storage is still very imperfect. Some of the CO2 stored underground may leak in the atmosphere, and they guess about 10 or 20%. But even with this leakage, compared to gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen has a much lower CO2 emission. Finally, there is green hydrogen. The main feature of green hydrogen is that it is produced by electrolysis of water using electricity generated from renewable energy sources. This technology is called electrolyzer. Green hydrogen is 100% CO2 free and thus the most environmentally friendly hydrogen. Additionally, green hydrogen has another advantage. I believe that in the future, green hydrogen will become the most important type of hydrogen because it is not only CO2 free, but it also does not rely on natural gas or coal. Considering Japan's energy security, whether it's gas or coal, especially gas, there is a dependency on the Middle East. The current Russia-Ukraine war has restricted LNG supplies, for example. Fossil fuel-based energy sources are regionally concentrated and inherently involve geopolitical risks. However, green energy is produced from water, which is available everywhere. Therefore, it avoids geopolitical risk. For these 2 reasons, I believe hydrogen will hold a central position in the future. The Japanese government believes that too. It does not emit CO2 and it has little to no geopolitical risk. Of course, in the meantime, as I mentioned earlier, the expansion of gray hydrogen usage, being the cheapest, is significant. And the role of blue hydrogen is also expected to grow as carbon capture and storage technology becomes more sophisticated. Among these three types of hydrogen, the Japanese government is planning to support green and blue. The government refers to this support as green transformation, or GX. This is focusing on hydrogen with low CO2 emissions. The concept of clean hydrogen includes both these types of hydrogen, and this presents the major business opportunities going forward. So for hydrogen utilization, transportation of hydrogen is essential. The place where hydrogen is produced and where it is used are inevitably far apart. Particularly for the supply of green hydrogen from overseas to Japan, Australia and India are expected to be the major supplying countries. However, at this point in time, hydrogen transport is not yet feasible. It's dangerous and it's very volatile. Therefore, it is still not possible to bring hydrogen to Japan in its original form in any sort of meaningful quantity. In the future, if hydrogen tankers become practical, it will be possible to transport liquid hydrogen to Japan. Currently, the existing hydrogen carrier is ammonia. Hydrogen is converted to ammonia and then brought to Japan. This is the simplest method, and there are no current obstacles to achieving that. How is ammonia produced, you might ask? As shown here, this is an example of green hydrogen. As I mentioned earlier, CO2-free hydrogen is produced from renewable energy and water, and this hydrogen is then mixed with nitrogen to become CO2-free ammonia. This ammonia is then transported safely to Japan. There are other technologies available, but ammonia is currently the most readily available and the most used one. Therefore, it is crucial to note that the government support applies not only to hydrogen, but also to ammonia produced from hydrogen. For example, a typical application is CO2-free green ammonia. There are coal-fired power plants where this ammonia can be co-fired with coal right now. This means using ammonia directly, which is a very efficient use of ammonia. And naturally, such projects are also eligible for government support. As I mentioned, this is the energy mix for 2030 according to the 6th Basic Energy Plan. One is the primary energy supply, which includes all of the energy used throughout Japan. This covers electricity sources and also energy used in other forms, such as fuel for automobiles. It includes all energy used beyond just power generation. The other is the power generation mix, which refers to the energy used specifically for power generation. The target for 2030 is here. Hydrogen is here, indicated at 1%. It says hydrogen ammonia. In 2022, it was almost zero, but that target now is 1% by 2030. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's huge. However, in the 6th Basic Energy Plan, which is coming up, this one aims for the period of around 2040, and the figure for hydrogen is expected to be much larger. One of the major advantages of hydrogen is its versatility. It can be used in various applications. First, in the transportation sector, Toyota has developed the world's first commercially successful fuel cell vehicle. This involves putting hydrogen into the vehicle to generate electricity, which then powers the motor to drive the car. This is called a fuel cell. And what about the future? While electric vehicles may continue to increase, hydrogen is also being used not only in passenger cars, but in trains and in trucks as well. Hydrogen is starting to be used as a fuel for various modes of transportation throughout the country. It's just silent and basically invisible at this point in time. Next is the industrial sector. A significant demand for hydrogen is expected to emerge from this area. For instance, the typical application, though it is still in the research stage, is the production of iron. Currently, iron is produced using coal, but hydrogen could replace coal in this process known as hydrogen reduction iron manufacturing. There is great anticipation for this technology. Additionally, hydrogen is expected to be used in the chemical industry. Both the chemical and steel industries, which are crucial to Japan, are currently developing technologies for hydrogen utilization, and there are expected to be realized great leaps in technology in the very near future. Then there is the household sector. In homes, hydrogen can be used in appliances such as heat pumps, which are essentially residential fuel cells. Hydrogen will be used to generate electricity for household use, making the technology even more common in the near future. Of course, there is also power generation. One of the most realistic near-term applications is the co-firing of hydrogen with coal in power plants. Burning coal alone emits a large amount of CO2, but mixing it with green ammonia can significantly reduce this emission. Hydrogen can be used also as a heat source because it can be burned. It is the only energy source that does not emit CO2. Therefore, it can be used as a heat source in industrial processes. For example, in the food production factory, where baking is involved, switching the heat source from hydrogen will greatly reduce CO2 emissions. This is another major benefit of hydrogen. When considering electricity alone, theoretically, all energy could be supplied by renewable sources like wind or solar power. However, for CO2-free burning heat sources, hydrogen is the only option. Industrial processes always require heat source, and hydrogen can be used in these processes. In Japan, the world's first yakitori restaurant that cooks with hydrogen gas has opened. Cooking requires fire, and a delicious steak, for instance, cannot be grilled with electricity. There are plenty of steak restaurants that use coal to grill meat, but by switching the flame to hydrogen, the CO2-free restaurant can be achieved. It is said that the taste is even better than using traditional heat sources due to the properties of hydrogen. That's funny, but it's true. The versatility of hydrogen, allowing it to be used in all aspects of our lives and industrial activities, is one of its greatest advantages. Let me now talk about how the Japanese government plans to support the adoption of hydrogen, which is expected to become a key pillar of the green energy in the future. Japanese policy documents emphasize domestic hydrogen supply, producing hydrogen within Japan. But there is also a recognition of certain limitations. One reason is that domestically produced hydrogen is likely to be expensive. As I mentioned earlier, domestic hydrogen production primarily relies on renewable energy sources such as wind and solar power for electrolysis. However, Japan's renewable energy scale is relatively small. Consequently, economies of scale do not work well, leading to higher electricity costs, which in turn will likely result in higher costs for domestically produced hydrogen. Another reason is that the supply volume will not be sufficient. If society starts to widen the use of hydrogen, domestic supply alone will not be enough. It just doesn't have time to catch up. Initially, this is a chicken and egg situation. Therefore, the Japanese government response to this is to develop a subsidy program for the import of hydrogen as part of a large-scale global supply chain. This is big. To mitigate these risks and ensure the feasibility of initial large-scale hydrogen supply projects, the Japanese government prepared a CFD arrangement to include imported hydrogen. Many countries use similar subsidy schemes, and it has become a common term. This diagram simply illustrates how the subsidy framework is structured and calculated. The strike price, shown in the red line here, is the price at which the hydrogen suppliers need to sell to make a profit to sustain their business. If the price falls below this, the business becomes unsustainable. So as a first step, the Japanese subsidy system is to provide to hydrogen suppliers, not consumers. The subsidy is given to suppliers of hydrogen. It is not given to the consumers. Therefore, hydrogen suppliers must set a certain price. If the price is too low, they will incur losses and the project will be unfeasible. The strike price is the price that makes the project viable. On the other hand, the reference price, shown in the blue line here, is what consumers look at when deciding whether to buy hydrogen or gas. It represents the price of alternatives like gas or coal, which are typically cheaper. Since the reference price is low, consumers might prefer gas over hydrogen, thus hindering the spread of hydrogen, which is the goal of this program. The basic idea of the Japanese government is to subsidize this gap to ensure hydrogen's adoption. This means that suppliers can sell at a certain strike price, receiving the necessary subsidy to make up the difference, effectively enabling them to sell at a competitive rate. Consumers can buy hydrogen at a price comparable to gas, while suppliers receive a subsidy to cover the gap between the lower market price and the higher strike price necessary for their business. Japan's CFD scheme is very similar to the one used in the UK, which it was modeled after. Of course, if the situation reverses, suppliers might have to repay the subsidies. This could happen if gas prices rise significantly due to geopolitical risks, for example, as seen with the current high gas prices. Conversely, if hydrogen supply costs decrease due to project scaling, the strike price might fall, thus changing the dynamics. However, at present, this subsidy system is necessary to bridge that gap. You might wonder how the government selects the projects to grant a subsidy to. A draft of the selection criteria has been released, although it is still provisional and the details will be finalized later. A manufacturer will need to submit a project proposal to the government. There are certain things that the government is looking for in these proposals, obviously, and we've laid some of them out, but not all here in this briefing. One important criteria is securing an off-tanker. Overseas hydrogen suppliers must ensure that there is a buyer in Japan for their hydrogen and present this in their project proposal. This is both a crucial and a challenging aspect. Additionally, the project must include proper risk sharing between the government and the company. Projects that push all the risk onto the government will obviously have trouble getting selected, but also sound financial management needs to be obvious in the proposal. Attention should also be given to the geopolitical risks within each project. Another mandatory criteria is the production of at least 1,000 tons of hydrogen, which is considerably a low threshold. Post-support autonomy is also essential. Subsidies are not provided indefinitely. They are available for a specific period of time, after which the project must be self-sustaining with an expected decrease in costs over time. Projects in sectors that are hard to decarbonize will be prioritized. For instance, projects using hydrogen for iron production or in the chemical industry are likely to be favored. These projects have a higher chance of being selected for government support due to their significant impact on reducing CO2 emissions in difficult to abate sectors. Further details of the subsidy scheme, which are of great interest to the industry, will be discussed and decided further. Just last week, the Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Saito, stated that applications for subsidies to bridge the price gap with fossil fuels will begin this summer. So the CFD scheme is already teed up. Based on the information we have available right now, it will likely be on a first-come, first-served basis. Companies that apply early will be prioritized for subsidies. Of course, the subsidies are limited and cannot be granted to all projects. Those that meet the criteria and apply early will, of course, receive preferential treatment. In summary, I've discussed Japan's hydrogen market, Japan's policies related to it, and issues that are related to the production, storage, and transportation of hydrogen. Let me reiterate that 2024 marks a significant turning point for Japan's hydrogen market and policies. This also presents a major opportunity for businesses related to hydrogen, including hydrogen supply and technologies like electrolyzers, water electrolysis, and CCS. These developing technologies will also be eligible for subsidies. Thank you for being involved and engaged. Don't forget to tune in weekly to our regular political updates every Sunday morning. Thanks for tuning in.